Hi, I'm Chris Overstreet, and I have opinions. I keep putting this video off for various reasons. It's... Right now, I'm not really feeling on making any videos at all, for one thing. But more importantly, I know that this video is going to have a significant amount of blowback from conservatives, but what else is new? It began when I saw this reposted on Blue Sky, a bit of commentary from our wonderful Vice President, JD Vance. Joy Reid has had such a good life in this country. It's been overwhelmingly kind and gracious to her. She's far wealthier than most, yet she oozes with contempt, he says. My honest, non-trolling advice to Joy Reid is that you'd be a much happier person if you showed a little gratitude. For those who don't know, Joy Reid is a journalist, a woman, and black. And what stood out to me about this particular post is how JD Vance is phrasing it as if this country did not need to do anything for Joy Reid, as if Joy Reid, being a black woman, did not belong to the country, and that everything she has, including her freedom, is strictly speaking a gift, not a right. And so my response when I first saw that was basically, well, he's showing off his white sheets again. Fascist gonna fash. And of course that generated the kind of response that, well, this wasn't in response to me what you're about to see, but it's pretty typical. This is the Republican senator from Pennsylvania talking on one of the Fox puppet programs.
I was there at Butler when the president was shot. Governor Shapiro's my governor. I was a friend of Charlie Kirk. This has to stop. It can't be anywhere in our political process. Now, I do think some of this horrible language on the extreme left, fascism, Nazism, authoritarianism, I think that's a recipe. That's an introduction, an encouragement to violence. It's got to stop, and I'm trying to be a strong voice for that, working across the aisle, even when we disagree with...
Yeah, that's enough of that. So, basically what this is a Republican senator, a Republican far-right MAGA senator, blaming liberals for a violent attack on a liberal public official. Yeah, think about that for just a minute, why don't you? But the core point of it is that conservatives claim that calling people fascists, calling people Nazis, calling people Klansmen, well, that's just name-calling. It doesn't mean anything. No, it's not name-calling, and yes, it does mean something. Conservatives love magic words like communist or socialist to denounce anything that they don't like. And their idea of a magic word argument is, all they have to say is that X is communist or fascist or pedophile, and we win. That's it. They don't care about the facts. They don't care about even common sense. Magic word arguments are meant to just shut down thought altogether. And they're not given in good faith. The reason that liberals calling conservatives fascists or neo-Nazis or Klansmen, etc., isn't a magic word argument is because we are going by the definitions of those terms. And I'm going to focus on fascist here because really that one stands for all of them as well. There are tons and tons of definitions of what constitutes fascism. A lot of them overlap, some of them don't. They're all incredibly complex because fascism in general is not that much more than an excuse for a dictator to take and keep power. And in that end, dictators will say and do practically anything if they think it will hold a power base together long enough for them to get absolute power. But fascism in particular does have some distinguishing characteristics from other kinds of dictatorial philosophies. And for purposes of this discussion, we're going to use the one that is espoused by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. At least for the moment, until Donald Trump shuts it down completely. Fascism is an ultra-nationalist, authoritarian political philosophy. It combines elements of nationalism, militarism, economic self-sufficiency, and totalitarianism. It opposes communism, socialism, pluralism, individual rights and equality, and democratic government. Fascism places the importance of the nation above all else. The unity of the national community is prioritized above the rights of individuals. This leads to an intense interest in defining which groups belong or do not belong to the national body. Nationalism in general has always had a strong racist component. A country is not a nation. A country is an area governed over by a particular government. A nation is the people. And it's not always all the people. To give you an example, the Roma, the Wanderers, they are a nation. But they're not a country, obviously. They have no government. They have no significant land area claimed. But they are a nation. The Navajo are a nation. But they're not a country. They're a subset of the United States. And never particularly happy about it at that. And when the right wing talks about America as a nation, they're talking about people who look like me. Pale or red-faced, as far as prone to sunburn, light hair, light eyes, European descent. In other words, white. And not just that. The Ku Klux Klan, the second Ku Klux Klan in particular, made it absolutely clear that they believed only white Christian men counted. Women, in the view of the Klan, were property. Blacks, Hispanics, Indians, subhuman. Allowed to live only on sufferance. Definitely not entitled to any rights whatsoever. That's what nationalism is. Our nation is the best. Our nation is chosen by God. Our nation is at war with every other nation and must strike first before we are ourselves destroyed, etc., etc. When people talk about American exceptionalism, what they're basically saying is they're American nationalists and they believe that they should be allowed to do things that nobody else is allowed to do. Fascism is nationalism taken to its logical extremes. The idea is that because we are the nation, we get what we want. And we have the right to persecute or outright destroy anybody who is not of our nation. That is what fascism means at its heart. And since people who are outside our nation don't have rights, that means the whole idea of universal human rights, out the window. Nope. Fascists do not subscribe to any idea of human rights, and since they do not subscribe to any ideas of equality or human rights, they also don't subscribe to democracy. Democracy means letting people not of the nation have a say in the decisions. That's no good. Only the nation decides, and nobody should ever have power over the nation. That is why fascists prefer a dictator. The dictator represents the will of the people. How do we know this? Because he was able to take control of the people. How did he take control of the people? By being the will of the people. Circular argument. In case you hadn't been able to tell already, fascism isn't big on logic either. But let's go back to the definition, because it still goes. Fascism is characterized by strident, often exclusionary nationalism, which I just went over, fixation with national decline, real or perceived, and threats to the existence of the national community. Yeah, what that means is that fascism frames things as there having been a great golden age in the past, but the enemy within has taken that away from us, and in order to be great again, We must get rid of the enemy within. For Mussolini, it was the socialists. For Hitler, it was a lot of people, but especially and most notably the Jews. And with Trump, it's immigrants and people of color, and above all, LGBT people. In fascist states, the definition continues, violence is accepted, even celebrated, if it serves or advances the national community. For fascists, violence often has a redemptive or purifying quality. Yeah, January 6, 2021, anybody? Or you might remember all sorts of talk over the past 10 years about Second Amendment solutions and use your bullet box to protect your ballot box and stuff like that. And right now, online, there's still all sorts of talk. Conservatives talking about, what are you going to do when the Civil War starts? Fascists love violence, provided it's not directed at them. To continue, fascism rejects the practice of representative or liberal democratic government. It holds that these practices interfere with the expression of the national will. It makes them weak. Instead, fascist governments are one-party states led by an authoritarian leader who claims to embody the national will. Fascists define the national will as advancing the interest of the national community. This usually means protecting or elevating the rights of the national community above the rights of those seen as alien, removing obstacles to national unity and supporting those suppressing those seen as challenging it, expanding the size and influence of the national state, often also seeking to expand territory through armed conflict. And after that point, the article goes on into describing Hitler's form of fascism in particular and how it led to the Holocaust, so we're going to stop there. Now, what has all this got to do with us? Well, bear in mind that Donald Trump has been speaking pretty consistently about dealing with the Democrats, or taking care of them. And Stephen Miller has rammed through an executive order which Trump signed that basically says any form of resistance or opposition, even speaking opposition to Donald Trump, will be considered as evidence of terrorism. Donald Trump is currently sending in troops to occupy cities which he sees as particularly in opposition to his rule. Donald Trump, throughout his political career, has praised people who act out in violence for his own ends. During his first campaign, he famously made the lie of promising, "Yeah, beat him up, go ahead, I'll pay the legal bills." He pardoned thousands of people who participated in his riot/coup attempt back on January 6th. And his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has praised the warrior ethos which he wants to instill in the military, by which he means kill everybody we order you to kill. I'll probably make a more detailed video about that in the future, but you get the point for now. Donald Trump is ramming through ever more levels of gerrymandering to make sure that the political process is rigged so that only Republicans can win elections. So much for democracy. He's trying to take direct control of Washington, D.C. and abolish whatever Democratic government is there. He actively opposes diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, to the point where right now there are floods in Alaska, which could have been prevented or at least mitigated, except that Donald Trump withheld the funding for the programs which would have allowed that to happen because, well, those are just DEI programs. Why were they DEI programs? Because they were mostly going to be directed towards impoverished Native American villages, which have just been wiped out. There's so much more I can go over, but Donald Trump's racism, his hatred, his intent to strike out at his enemies and eliminate all opposition to his government in any way, shape, or form, that by itself is proof enough by the definitions given that Donald Trump himself is a fascist. And he's not alone. At this point, almost the entire Republican Party and all of its supporters are on board with this. They also are fascists. We liberals aren't calling conservatives fascists because we want to win a magic word argument. We're calling conservatives fascists because we're trying to tell you they are fascists. And we believe that if you recognize that they are fascists and you feel like you're actually a decent human being, you'll stop voting for them. And events over the last few days have actually brought things full circle. Politico, which I should warn you is owned and operated by a Trump supporter, recently popped an article about how the Hitler Youth, the Republican GOP, young Republicans, and they really are stretching this definition because the people that they're quoting are currently all in their late 20s through mid-30s, and one of them is a state senator. Yeah, they are on the regular exchanging incredibly racist and violent talk, anti-black, anti-Semitic, anti-LGBT, pro-violence, pro-genocide. And I'll put the link to that in the description if you're interested, but yeah, it's, even by Republican standards, this wasn't good. And this was JD Vance's response. Focus on the real issues. Don't focus on what kids say in group chats. Kids do stupid things. Yeah, well, the thing is, my friend, when kids are doing stupid things, you shut them up and teach them better. And these aren't kids. These are grown-up people who ought to have known better, who ought to have believed better, who ought to have been better, and they absolutely were not. And they're either running for offices or they're staff members of people already in high office. And our Vice President, JD Vance, is defending them. See, have I left anything out? No, I think that's pretty much it, except to say, conservatives, we're calling you racists, we're calling you fascists, because you're motherfucking fascists. And we will keep calling you fascists, because that is what the definition of the word means. I'm Chris Overstreet, and I have opinions.